Yeah, so see? There's a thingy that says, says I'm talking. Okay, I am sitting so much lower than you, I kind of feel like Paul Simon in the... You can
Actually, what's really funny is that my hand, you can see my one hand and my other hand, and it looks like I got a gimp arm. Mario's dancing along too. Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Now that we have ruined all of our credibility and our reputations for all time, oh my god, this is why I can't do things with you.
This is why you can't give me a keyboard.
That's true.
Can the people hear the keyboard?
Yes.
I'm playing amazing stuff. They need to hear it.
So, Mario walks down the street. It's a street in a strange land. I am Kai. I am from Techno Funk Boy, which you can see right here. If you are here because of Dice Dreary, you also know me as Crethin from Dice Dreary. And you probably know that I am doing the soundtracks for the podcast. And you...
Me. My name is Dan. I am a musician professionally. I teach at the University of Houston. And I am here to pick apart and just rip to pieces music that this guy wrote.
So... you are seeing this either on Twitch or YouTube or on our Patreon right now. This is actually something that I do on our Dice and Dreary Patreon page fairly regularly, is I kind of dig into the theory behind what I'm doing with the music. And but it's normally me by myself. But this one we thought we would have some fun since Dan was going to join us.
Yeah.
As a little bit of a background, and I've told this story before in other places, but it was about a little over a year ago, where 8-Bit Music Theory did this video on non-functional harmony in Chrono Trigger.
Yep.
And I think I sent you that.
That
video.
was the first 8-bit video, 8-bit music theory video that I'd seen. Yeah.
Right. And so that video just completely blew my mind. And I had, on occasion, asked you musical questions before that.
Yeah.
But for the last year and a half, I've just been pestering you. And
yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me implore you, if your child wants to be a music major, first of all, no. There's no money. There's no money in that, right?
There is no money in that.
There's no money in that. But secondly...
hard truths.
But secondly, just look, I know we're not supposed to exploit our friends who are musicians for our own gain.
But that's how we do it.
But this is something we do.
Yeah.
And so I've totally done that with Dan, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But and in all honesty, I mean, without that video and you got me into stuff online.
Yeah.
That like what's his name?
Adam Neely.
Adam Neely.
Yeah, I love Adam Neely.
Rick Beato.
Rick Beato and the David Bruce guy, the composer that does stuff.
Yeah, and so a bunch of stuff like that, and so between those videos and pestering you about stuff, I have learned more in the last year being a musician than I have in the previous 20. And I would not have been able to do this soundtrack. I would not have been able to do this soundtrack a year ago. And so thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure. And it's like, actually, like the tune that we're going to talk about, I think is like honestly kind of proof of what you were just talking about, because there's no way you could have written this like...
Well, I didn't know what I was doing when I wrote it,
but this is
still not.
Well, this is okay. You may not know what you're doing, and I have the notes to prove it. So, but if no, seriously, I don't know if everybody can see this, but these are my notes that I actually spent about an hour and a half pulling apart.
Because of the lighting, it looks like you put nothing on that paper.
I just put some incredibly complicated stuff up. I need you. I've got multiple page of notes that took me about an hour and a half to pull apart this morning, just on this one piece, which has really
it's not long. It's
17 measures of content that ends up being repeated, but
right.
like Yeah, it's we got some cool stuff in here.
Yeah.
So
this is the theme song. We're going to talk about the theme song.
Yes.
Of the show. So if you've listened to the show, this is the theme song. Do we need to play it? I don't know.
Can we play it? I think we should play it.
Yeah, let me see if we can.
Yeah.
I didn't actually set that part up.
Okay.
And so we're going to find out. Wow, I'm like...
There it is.
Okay. Let's see if this comes through. It looks like it's coming through. So.
I can hear it. And he's so humble.
Well,
right here, right here.
You can see Perler Straw. That was my favorite part. That's good. That's my favorite part too.
We're gonna talk about these measures like a lot, because you have no idea what you're doing.
I had an idea of what I was doing. It wasn't technical.
Yeah.
But I had a plan.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where
Yeah,
the
this is it.
repeats.
Yeah,
We
that's
won't.
cool.
We won't keep it going.
Yeah. All right.
So, yeah, my process here is like at the very beginning, it is a little bit more normal, and I know what I was doing at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of trying to make this kind of creepy, cool sound.
Yeah.
Now that last part, I was just what I was trying to do was gradually collapse the chord into a resolution.
Yep.
Or or to continue tension.
Yeah.
But,
no, right. Yeah.
So that's what I was doing is I was moving one or two notes at a time as the chord just kind of compressed on itself.
That's pretty much what ended up happening.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, I guess before I get into my thorough and
Do we need music up?
highly academic analysis, do you have it? Yeah, I would love the music.
Boom.
Okay. Oh, look at this! Beautiferous. All right. So, so the way music theory works, and the way music theories worked historically, is that what?
I'm just gonna leave.
You're just gonna go away? Okay. Bye. Bye. This is the Dan Show now.
Right.
Thank you for tuning in.
It's like I can't even see myself behind the music now.
You can't, yeah, just duck a little bit more. All right, so I'm gonna move in so everybody can see my face a little bit better. So the way music theory works is first, step one, you edge your friend out who actually wrote the music, and then you start stealing all the glory for yourself. The way that typically it works is that musicians will write music that they think sounds good, and they're like, "Hey, this is great," and then audiences will either respond to that saying, "Yeah, it does," or "I don't like it so much," and then composers will typically go ahead with either that feedback saying, okay, let's write what they want, or no, I really do like this thing, I want to move in that direction. Theory comes in later to explain why things are the way they are, or what they did. So if you take J.S. Bach or something like that, it's not like J.S. Bach had a bunch of rules in his head that he said okay, I need to move from this chord to that chord, and I can't move to this third chord because it breaks the rules.
Right.
What it was is that he, Bach, would write something like, this sounds right, and he wouldn't do the things that sound wrong. And periodically he would break rules of his own making, but the rules really came in later when music theoreticians said he always uses these 7 notes at the same time. And if he wants to move away from those, he'll do it in this way.
I did that yesterday with you, just the exact same way Bach did.
The exact same.
No, I was working on a song and I sent you a text going, what is this chord?
What is this chord?
Because
right.
I was trying to play a diminished chord and I moved a note and it sounded a lot better.
Yeah.
And you were like, no, that's wrong. And I'm like, it sounds awesome, so I think you're wrong.
Yeah. So I guess we should say when you're going into new stuff, there's not a right and wrong so much as there is established the way that people did before us. And so Mozart would break the rules that Bach had sort of set up, and then Beethoven's well, screw that, I'm going to do this over here. And now the pinnacle of Western tradition, we have the piece that we're looking at today, in which he said Bach and Mozart and Beethoven and the rest of those guys were morons, I'm just going to do what I'm doing here. So what we have here is a theme song to a D&D podcast. And it's dark and it's mystical and it's got a bunch of sounds that sort of go along with that. And so everything that we're doing is kind of pointing towards that in one way or another.
Yeah.
So it's also got this 8-bit thing that you've had going on for a while with just like the connections to the Techno Funk Boy,
Right,
and the
yeah.
similar like tones that you've used before. And I don't have all the tones at my disposal, which is probably a good idea because the rest of this interview would just be me like dorking around on the keyboard.
I've specifically not taught him how to change the patch.
And we would get nothing done at all. So anyway, without further ado, so here's what we have. We start off, and you've got a couple of ambient sounds in the background, and you've really got a bass. I guess it's down here. And what it's doing is it's just outlining a C minor chord. So we're playing in the key of C minor. If anybody's got music training, you've got 3 flats right there, which is the same as the key of E flat major, and we're actually going to be screwing with that in just a moment. So what we have is basically, when you got a key signature like that, you've got the idea that C minor is going to be the beginning and end of everything we've got. We call that tonic. C is the tonic pitch. C minor chord is the tonic chord. Everything is going to start there and it's going to come back to there in a really cool way, as we will see in a moment. So what you've also got implied there is a series of notes that he's going to use for melody. C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, and C. Those are the 7 notes that he's going to use like to make his chords as it's going on. So we start here, and the bass line throughout the majority of it basically just sort of outlines the chords that are being played. And so we can kind of forget about that as like an idea factory, because all it's doing is like reinforcing what's happening. And so so we've got this C minor chord. Okay, everything's cool. Okay, C minor, it's got 3 notes. We're totally fine. And then the very first thing that happens, is that we take this like everything that we've done in the music history and just throw it straight out the window. Because the chord that happens isn't just a C minor chord. It's a C minor chord with a 7th and an 11th in there as well. So you've got basically a chord with an extra B flat in it and an F in it, which a B flat is kind of acceptable because it would have been the 7, but then you're adding this 11th in as well, and then not only that, but the melody comes in on the 11th, and it sits on the 11th, and so you're just like sitting there looking at a C minor chord and going, how can I play something that's not in C minor but still make it sound cool? And the answer, apparently, according to Kai, is the 11th. And so he's got this 11th chord, which is really hip. So you've got this really an ambient sound to the C minor. Yeah. It's not just a plain straight ahead C minor chord, which would be very stark and not very colorful. But we've got the 7th, we've got the 11th, and furthermore, the melody is sitting on the 11th, emphasizing it, which gives the thing a lot of color and makes it a lot more interesting than if you would have gone...
Yeah.
You know, because in this chord, when you play a C minor, that would have just like sat you on a 3rd, but instead, it's actually setting up a dissonance, and that's the first thing that we hear.
Yeah.
So you've got a dissonance in the first significant note in the entire piece. And so we got this cello sound that's playing the melody, and then this does eventually get resolved to an actual chord tone. But for a measure... Yeah, like almost legit an entire measure. You're just sitting on the 11th and letting that flavor just sort of permeate what's going on. Do you know who else did this? Miles Davis.
Oh, nice.
Yep. So you're using Miles' thing. So like what Miles would have done. Yeah, totally on purpose, I'm sure. What Miles would have done is if he would have taken like a, let's say we've got ourselves a C minor chord. He would have sat there. Like in actually the first solo in Kinda Blue, on that album, the tune So What, he basically just does that, like pretty emphatically, and he's messing around with the exact same color palette that you're messing with right there. So without doing it, you're channeling Miles Davis, and good job. We're not done yet though, because now what's happening is in your right hand, and please could I get the sound that you use? Like the choral background sound?
What did I use?
It doesn't matter. It does matter. It matters because this is basically the same sort of thing that's being used in the Chrono Trigger soundtrack. So like this chord that's being used there, it's like, especially when you hit the 3rd chord, which we'll get to. I've been talking about one chord for this last 15 minutes, but like it's very, very Chrono Trigger. It's like
Yeah.
Were you trying to do that by any chance?
I wasn't trying to do Chrono Trigger in particular. I was studying up on like ambient music.
Okay.
And trying to create the harmonies.
Okay.
On that. You know, I mean, it's a horror game.
Yeah.
It's a horror podcast.
Yeah.
And so, trying to hit the dissonance more than like normal ambient music would.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, like Masudo on Chrono Trigger is using a lot of that same that same kind of ambient theory behind it.
So like the way that like if you want
to find that thing,
if you can, that would be great.
I gotta get this seat is
maneuver?
so low.
He's like sitting on the ground. It's hilarious. All right, so he's gonna.
All right,
I'm gonna entertain people with funny anecdotes while he looks for the string sound. I don't have any funny anecdotes, so you just have to.
I don't know if this is the one, but I love this sound.
Okay,
try
we're
that.
gonna use it.
We're gonna use it.
So what you've got here is a string pad sound, which actually works pretty well.
Yeah, it's not the same one, but I love that sound.
It's okay. It's the same sort of a background sort of thing, and so immediately it's totally evocative of that. So you get this quest sort of feel, this like the idea of an RPG, the idea of a developing story, of a really long story arc. You're getting all these things that are just coming up to my mind as it's being played. So quick music theory thing. The way that chords are stacked are in thirds. Until they're not, and I'll explain that. What that means is that
yes until no.
Yes, but also no. So like if you were to take
this is what your kids are learning.
Yeah, for real.
If they become music majors.
Yeah. So everything you know, just forget it because nothing is real.
Don't let your boss watch this video.
Yeah, I hope not. I hope not. So like the way that it works is that you take a C chord. So I mean, you can see my hands a little bit in the video there, but like if you want to do a C minor chord, you start on the C. Okay, there you go. Great.
So you cut off the last note, but y'all don't need it.
Yeah, it's fine. All right, so C starts, and then you wouldn't use, like, to create a chord, you wouldn't necessarily use the next note. You go to the third note. So this would be called the root, or the 1. Then this would be called the third. You'd skip the 4th, you'd go to the 5th. Then you go to the 7th. You notice we're just using, like, odd numbers as it goes along. Mm-hmm. So what happens is then, as it goes further and further, you keep referring to them as those chord tones. So, like, if I wanted to make a C minor chord with a D in it, I wouldn't call the D the second, even though it would be the second note in the scale. It would be called the 9th.
Got it, yeah.
So, because now it is officially a chord tone. And so what's happened is you've started throwing in these extra notes. Normally the first 3, the root, the 3rd, and the 5th are the ones that are regular. But what we've got going on in, like, a lot of these chords is that you're adding in the extras, the 7th, the 9th, the 11th, and even the 13th, which is literally... There are no more notes. Like, at that point, he's run out of notes. He's using all the notes that you could possibly use in like the scale that you've chosen.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's what's happened. The first thing that happens is that he's thrown extra notes in so that you sort of lose a sense of the centeredness of it. It's not just a pure minor chord. There's something extra. Plus the melody is emphasizing it. So it gives us this really sort of yearning, sort of off-worldly sort of effect because he's not playing into the simple, typical way that people would normally write. You'd normally choose, for the melody, you choose a note that actually exists in the chord.
Yeah.
And now he's like, no, I want this note in the chord now too. So there it is. All right. So now for the next few chords, what happens is it's actually a pretty predictable motion because what happens, the bass will start on a C, and then it will go down to a B flat, and then it will go to an A flat, and it's working its way down to the 5, to the dominant chord. And so what happens is, this is kind of cool. In the right hand, the chords are basically the exact same each time. You get an E flat, an F, a G, and a B flat. And so you can make these chords happen by simply moving down that, but keeping your right hand in the exact same place. Oops, wrong chord. There it is. Yeah. Beautiful. All right, so my favorite chord in this entire thing is the chord that happens at measure 10, which is... if you want to call it properly, it's an A flat, major 7, 13 chord. And what that means is that it's an A flat chord, which is a major chord. If you're dealing with a minor key, major chords pop up periodically just based on how the notes work together. Mm-hmm. But in addition to that, you've got a major 7th in there, and you've actually reached all the way up so that you're playing a F with it as well. and it just makes the most beautiful sound. And while the F is in there, your cello is playing E flat down to C, which are actually
We're
regular chord tones.
on the
So like
second-
there, second
the
line,
second line right there.
first measure there. So it'll go, and it's playing around pretty much in like the regular chord tones, but you have all these extra notes that are being, exhibited as well. It's just a really nice fit. So what you've got there is a pop music progression where the bass is just moving down by a whole step. But you also have all these jazz chords that are adding all the extra ambience to it as it's being played, and the cello is just playing who knows what on top of it. So, okay, so that gets us about through the easy part of the music. Make sense?
This is the part that I actually understood when I was writing it.
All right. So now, this is where things stop making sense. So far we've got like regular things that are happening. Basically, the right hand is holding those same 4 notes. The bass part is going down and just gradually pushing us towards that dominant chord, which I'll explain in a sec. But and then the melody's playing over the top of it. So far we've got all that. Now here's the interesting thing. We're gonna work ourselves towards what's called a cadence. A cadence is the idea of the end of a phrase in some way. So if you're gonna go "Happy birthday to you," "Happy birthday to you," that's kind of an end.
Yeah.
"Happy birthday, dear," whatever you are. "Happy birthday to you." That's a more thorough cadence at the very, very end. And what we've got here is the world's most ornate, stretched out cadence. The world's longest,
That part was intentional.
most put together cadence that I've ever seen in my life, and it's like absurdly hip how we do it. And actually, this entire chord progression could fit perfectly into either a Muse song or a Schubert lieder.
I listened to a lot of Muse.
Okay.
So
This fits. This actually fits really well. So, like, I once did in college, I did an analysis of a Muse tune, and I compared it with Lieder from, like, Mendelssohn and Schubert, which Lieder is just, like, songs that they were writing during, like, a vocalist and a pianist. And, like, basically, I was like, see, these are the same chord progressions. This is the same stuff.
And that doesn't surprise me at all. No, I mean,
Yeah.
they're so much of what they do is just putting classical music with guitar.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what we have here is basically the same sort of stuff. It's the same sense of chromaticism, like these chromatic notes and the way that you're using tonality. So, okay, here's where it starts getting funky. We're in the key of C minor. If you're talking about basic tonality stuff, like basic music theory, what's supposed to happen is we're supposed to get a C, a G, and back to C. So technically, we're supposed to have a C minor chord, a G major chord, or a G dominant chord, and then you go back to C minor. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen here. So the first thing that you just start messing up is that what we have is a G minor chord instead of a G major chord, which means that you're keeping the B flat in the key signature instead of turning it into a B natural the way that like Bach would have done, which is okay. It gives us like a modal sense of what's going on, but it also superimposes a different key for a split second. So for just a moment, you're going into a different key in order to get back to the same key.
Gotcha.
Let's fast forward for a second. The very last chord in this progression is this G chord. The one at the very, very end. Let me see if I can get my... The bottom measure right there. It says G and it's got a B natural in the melody right there.
Yeah.
That's the chord that we're getting to.
Right.
So starting right now on this G minor chord, we're getting ready to... We're basically just putting off getting to that G chord, which is going to push us back to the C minor chord. So, and this is where it gets kind of funky. So we got a G minor chord right there, which exists if you just keep the notes, but you don't try to push it back to the cadence. And then you get a B diminished chord right afterwards. You've got ourselves a B, a D, an F, and an A flat, which is like Beethoven's favorite chord. And it's super cool because the notes are perfectly equidistant from each other.
Oh, yeah.
So like a B and a D are 3 half steps away from each other. A D and an F are 3 half steps. An F and an A flat are 3 half steps. And an A flat up to a B are 3 half steps again. So technically, this could be considered a B diminished chord, or a D diminished, or an F diminished, or an A flat diminished.
Oh, neat.
They're literally all the same exact chord.
Yeah, nice.
So, but you actually did this properly without realizing you were doing it.
That was intentional.
This is pushing us towards a sense of C minor. So we've got ourselves a B dominant chord, which would push us back to C minor. So you got a G chord that's getting ready to, it's replacing a G chord. Then you get this B dominant, which, check this out. If you were to take these same notes, B, D, F, and A flat, if I were to change one of these notes and move it from the A flat down to a G, you have the G dominant chord, the G dominant chord, the one that we're trying to get to all the way over there. So you're just putting it off, but you're also doing it in this way that's incredibly dissonant. These minor thirds that are just stacked together, just like it could literally split off into like 6 or 7 different directions at this point, because it's this one chord that can be used in different ways. And the way that you choose to bring us off is you choose to bring us to what I called an F minor add 6. And that is an F minor chord with a D in it, which is a spooky chord. Yeah. It's a nice spooky sound. But what's extra spooky about it is you didn't realize that you were actually playing, wait for it, a half diminished chord in first inversion. Now what that means is trying to like make it as quick as possible. Basically what we have here, yeah, okay. In jazz, you have patterns that are called 2-5 patterns. A 2-5 pattern is, if you're in the key of C, you'll take the second note, which is a D, and you'll go from D to the 5th note, which is a G. You'll go from a D minor chord to a G chord, and then you bring that back to 1. It's a really common thing in jazz. So you'll go from a 2 chord to a 5 chord back to 1. In minor, you got to do something different, because normally in major, your 2 chord would be a minor chord, your 5 chord would be a dominant chord, and then you go back to your major 1.
Right.
But in minor, your 2 chord has to be a half diminished chord, which is actually what you did right there.
Got it.
And so if you were to take a moment and just sort of simplify everything that you have here, basically what you've got is, simplest way of doing it is you start with a C minor chord, you eventually get back to a G dominant chord, the way that Bach would, and then you come back to C. But in between there, you put a bunch of like intermediate steps.
Yeah.
So like this F minor add 6 chord is basically a half diminished chord that fits exactly like a 2-5 would.
Right.
In minor, again, we're back to Miles Davis, because this is the sort of thing that, like, you know, if you take the tune like Stella by Starlight, he does like left and right, like all over the place. And so technically, F minor add 6 fits perfectly within the key, the E flat major or C minor that you've got going on. It wouldn't fit so naturally to make it a D half diminished, which is technically what it is, using the same notes, just respelling them. Right. So in another layer of looking at it, we have this big fat weird minor 2-5 that uses a half diminished and then goes over to the G chord. And then we have, bringing us around to these 3 chords that I don't understand much at all. There's a few ways we could look at it.
Stump the teacher.
Stump the chump. So basically what happens at this point is that we've got a pedal chord, which is this G going on. You remember how we were saying we're trying to move to G so that the G can push us back to C?
Right.
Okay, so what you've done is you haven't really resolved this F minor add 6 or the D half diminished, but you put in this pedal G early.
Yep.
So everything else is going to finally work its way around to G,
exactly.
but the bass part comes in sooner. And the other thing that happens is the melody sits on a C this entire time too. So technically, the melody came back to C, which is what we've been trying to do. We've been trying to get back home to C. We started at C, we're trying to get back home to C. The melody's like, I'm there, I'm already sitting on C.
Right.
While the bass is like, nuh-uh, I'm not there yet. I'm sitting on G, waiting for C to show up. And the rest of the chords are going, wait, I haven't even put my pants on yet, because we're not even close to any of these chords. And so what you've got is this gradually dissolving half diminished chord, or this gradually dissolving F minor add 6, if you want to look at it this way. And so you've got, your chords are gradually going down, and so you have the sense of going down, 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 until eventually it does resolve into this G chord, and so we only have the notes that exist in G. But it's gradually materializing into that. And in the meanwhile, you didn't distract us by having the melody play a whole lot of stuff. The melody's just holding this long tonic note the entire time, and your inner voices, like your chord tones, are gradually working their way back to a clear 5 chord, a clear dominant chord. So the other way you can look at it is what's called a, oh no, I'm gonna forget the name for this.
Got to start over.
Yeah, right.
Hold on.
Just review. It's
I don't have video editing software.
Okay.
So we got to
just everybody
This is
forget
all-
what you saw. Yeah. We'll just
Right,
start
we'll just-
again.
yeah.
Hi, my name is Dan, and I'm taking over this podcast. Basically, what it is that if you start on your key, here's your C minor.
Oh, there should be so much how short I am in this video.
I'm that short in real life, so like I'm enjoying this very much because like normally I'm like half a foot shorter than Kai is, so I'm like, Anyway, so like here's what I do. If I were to take, let's see if I can move it closer to where the camera is. Okay, this is good enough. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my upper two notes and I'm gonna move them up just a little bit, and I'm gonna go back. Technically, what this does is it goes from a C chord to an F chord, back to a C chord. A C minor chord to an F minor chord, back to a C chord.
Right.
And what you've basically done is you've taken the exact same sort of thing. So you've moved the chords that we want, the G chord, and you've moved, if I've got this G in the bass, I've had a G, I've moved it up a half step. I've taken a D, because I'm supposed to have a G, B, D. You've taken the B, you've moved it up to a C. You've taken the D, you've moved it up to an E flat. You've taken a G, you've moved it up to an A flat. So you've got literally every voice is suspended. It's a three-part suspension that gradually moves down to the dominant chord, which finally brings us back to C minor. So in other words, quite literally, Schubert could have written this. His voice leading would have been slightly different.
Probably not because he's dead.
Well, yeah, probably not. And he wouldn't have used like the cool drums in the background.
Right.
But like, we haven't gotten to the drums yet. But like basically, he would have written it in a slightly different way. But in terms of how the voices move and how the chords move from chord to chord, this could be like a Schubert or Schumann or Mendelssohn sort of leader. And they would have done things a little bit differently. Like there were certain places where some of these voices do connect. Like I just said, like you're supposed to be playing a B, a G, a B, and a D, and instead you're playing a half step higher on all of them, and then you bring it back down. He would have connected those in a slightly different way. Sure. Yeah. But the job would have basically been the exact same. So
cool.
Yeah, and so if I might compliment you just a little bit further as well,
But by all means.
Yeah, okay.
This is what we're here for.
That's right. We're here to praise the genius of. All right. So the other thing. Okay. So one, your harmonic palette has increased drastically because before this, most of the chords you were using were totally diatonic.
Yeah.
And there were only 3 notes per chord. Right now you've got like 6 notes going, and you've got a bunch of implied notes because you're using an 11th but not a 9th, so it implies the 9th but it's not there. It's just a more subtle and intelligent way of creating a chord voicing. But also your rhythms are getting better too, because you're not just using the same rhythm over and over. There's parts, using the finger again, so quickly picking up ba-da-dee, holding on, then resolving, then moving on. So you've got moments of motion and moments of holding.
Yeah.
And it's actually totally balanced all the way through. And then when the melody goes forward, like looking at the second line down there where you're just sitting on that one note the entire time, you're letting other things happen. So it's not like there's nothing happening, and it's not like there's everything happening all at once. It's that you're actually crafting it in a way that there's always something happening that your ear can pay attention to, but very rarely are they conflicting with each other. There's not multiple things happening at the same time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, which is much more like, it's much less basic writing. It's more mature writing than what happened before. And it's not that simple stuff can't be good. It's just that this is more informed. It's more thorough than what was happening before. And it's only, if you drop out the introduction, we're talking about 12 measures.
Yeah.
It's 12 measures of music, but I just talked about it for half an hour. So, and I'm sorry if I lost half the people, but the point is, like, before, I might have been able to explain your stuff using very simple terminology that somebody who literally only knew 3 chords on a guitar would be able to understand. But
I would play the minor 6th in there.
Oh, good for you.
So that's 4 chords.
Okay, there it is, yeah. But, like, the thing is, you got to dip deeper into, like, the more, like, technical terminology in order to explain what's happening right now. It's not like so simple that I can say, oh yeah, it's just a 1 or it's just a 4 or whatever it is. It's like you're actually you're doing a lot of really complicated stuff in here. So that's it.
Yeah, and
That's my thought.
Thank you. Well, one great thing this soundtrack has done for me is that, you know, writing a horror soundtrack, it doesn't lend itself to, you know, 1, 4, 5 minor 6.
Yeah, you want to do more than that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and so it's really kind of forced me to branch out and look at more interesting stuff too.
Yeah, it's good.
It's very cool.
Yeah, the harmonically, like, the most exciting thing to me is how the harmony's working. The second is how your melody is playing into the harmony. But then the rhythm of the melody is good, and also, I mean, your choice of sounds is good too. Like the timbres that you're using is, like I said, it's really
so much fun.
Yeah, well, it's like I was like listening to it, going, oh man, this sounds like Chrono Trigger. Like it sounds like the Forest theme for Chrono Trigger, and I'm like, this is really, really pretty straightforward.
Which is the song that, I mean, this is the focus of that video.
Yeah, exactly. Of that, just bringing it full circle,
Right.
like that video that we heard like a year ago or whatever. As far as the functional, non-functional harmony thing is concerned, you basically have functional harmony everywhere in here. There is an extended cadence. You basically have everything from that G minor chord is basically a 5 chord that's been stretched out over the course of the next 7 measures. So that's what it is.
Yeah, that song, the Forest theme in Chrono Trigger, you know, kind of doubles as something very ambient.
Yeah.
And is using those kind of techniques that I've also been looking. I mean, you know, especially going into this song is what I was hitting on a whole lot.
That's cool.
Is ambient stuff.
Let me sort of say something about that too. Like, the cool thing about, and like, if there are any musicians that are watching this that are writing their own music, here's a good rule: if you want to make something similar to somebody else, you need to intentionally steal. Like, you need to say, I am really trying to rewrite this tune. I'm trying to do this again. Because the problem is that if you know what's influencing your writing, you will pull influence from it, but you won't be just like blatantly copying them. If you don't know what you're copying, you're just going to copy it and be like, hey, that's this. That's like literally the melody from this Rush tune or whatever. And it's like...
Did you pick Rush because I stole Rush?
I picked Rush because you stole Rush that one time.
Okay, so in all seriousness, I don't know how that happened, but I totally got Fly By Night.
I'm trying to play Tom Sawyer, but I can't. Yeah, never mind.
So ripped off the entire song. Like the whole riff, note for note. And like I was like in a band, and the singer at the time was like, dude, this really sounds like Rush's Fly By Night. And I'm like, I don't even know that. Like, he brought it to my attention. I'm like, dude, I don't know that song.
Yeah.
And it's like, we this was pre like internet this was pre smartphones. And so we couldn't just bring it up. And he like brought it up later. He's like, dude, this is really Fly By Night. Yeah. And I was like, I don't even know what song you're talking about. Obviously I did. Note for note.
So it's like, if in a situation like that, if you would have said something like, I'm going to write a Rush song. Then it would have ended up being a Rush song that Rush hadn't written.
Exactly.
And so in this case, you said, all right, I'm going to do something similar to this Chrono Trigger thing. I'm going to use these elements. I'm going to go for it. And I'm going to try to evoke the same sort of function, I guess. Like, you can say, like, I'm doing the same sort of job that tune did. Then all of a sudden you end up with something that he could have written, but it wasn't it. And I'm like, yeah, this is evocative of that sort of thing. But I didn't say, oh yeah, he's stealing. It's not the progression that they use. Well, maybe the descending bass line, I guess. But that's so common to everything. It's not. You can't copyright or steal something that's that basic or like elemental to music. It's anyway. I guess what I'm saying is that it is influence but doesn't copy, and that's the exact thing that you want to do. Whenever you set out to do that, just say to yourself, I'm gonna do this thing, and I'm gonna be inspired by this and this and this. And you'll find out that you're not directly copying that, because your mind is consciously going, okay, you can't do this much, but you're still gonna get something out that works the same way.
The other thing I'm trying to do with the soundtrack, not as much with this song but with some of them, is John Carpenter.
Okay, cool.
Because man, some of his stuff in the, like, you know, from Halloween,
creepy.
Yeah, it's really great.
Yeah.
So
there it is.
Know, you'll hear Chrono Trigger and John Carpenter in the soundtrack,
and Miles Davis,
and Miles Davis,
and Bach.
If you ever wake up in the morning and you're like, I'm in the mood for some Miles Davis, but more in a Bach way, and maybe if John Carpenter was using it in a movie.
That was actually a video game.
But there was a video game from Squaresoft in the 90s. I'm your man.
That's right, ladies.
Oh gosh. So like this, if you're catching us on wherever we put this on YouTube or anything, this is the kind of stuff that most of the time I'm talking about on our Patreon page. But you definitely need to be listening to Dice Dreary, because this is the song that's happening in the beginning of every episode, and there's also a vocal version of the song that we did a whole video of. It was a lot of fun. It was yeah. That was actually the best video I've ever done, which is saying a lot because it's not that great.
No, it wasn't.
It's video. Yeah.
I was just, the best video you ever
the
did.
best video
okay,
I've
the
ever
best
done,
video
yeah.
you ever did. Mario agrees. There's Mario. Mario's here. Mario is
yeah.
Raccoon Mario is nodding in assent.
Yeah. So thank you for Let's clear that.
My pleasure.
That way you can see more.
More view. That's what the people want. There it is.
We have a studio audience.
That we do.
We told him he could do that. Thank you. Thanks for
man. My
going through
pleasure.
that. That
Thanks
was
for
a lot
having
of
me
fun.
on. Yeah,
I had
for me too.
That song's a lot of fun for me, and
I really enjoyed it. This is probably the most mature thing that I've seen that you've written.
I think it is.
Yeah, it's just it's very, and it's not like doing all the things. It's rather understated, but it's very, very intelligently put together. So kudos.
Thank you. That's the other thing for on our Patreon page, you can download the soundtrack as we're trying to post them as quick as we can. But
and if you get to the top level Patreon, then he's going to write you a song, and then I will harmonically analyze it, like this.
What level is that?
That's God mode.
But no,
That's
like
God
how
tier.
much per month?
It's $1,000 per month.
No, totally. Totally do that. All right. Well, I guess we'll shut it down at that point.
Cool.
Very cool. I appreciate it. And if people are on,
If they want to find me,
yeah,
find me on Instagram. It is my last name Gelok, but it's got 4 E's. So GEEEELOK. Did I say 5 E's? How many?
I
E's
think you said 5.
There are 4 E's.
4 E's.
Look for my name.
Yes.
Just find
But
me.
if there are
it's
any-
more music nerd stuff. Yeah.
Right. Especially saxophonist, you need to be following him.
Yeah.
That is going to make your life better. And also your playing. But your life most of all.
Probably.
Cool. All right, we'll shut it down.
All right.
Appreciate it. Where's the button?
End stream. End it.